So the intent is a point of occurrence, and its role is over. Like you have the intent for a cup of tea. That intent for a cup of tea was possible because the person who got the intent knows how to do a cup of tea. So that knowing directs the doing implied by the intent. But definitely that knowing would never have been translated into doing if the intent was not there. That's why intent is critical. So the mediating factors have no, if you look at the mediating variables in the doing of a cup of tea, they are all manifested or visible or sensible movements. But intent is just a moment of like a flashlight. Nevertheless, intent is at least present in the very background of the director. Like the director of a stage play is standing behind even the prompters, much behind the back curtain, or maybe even sitting in the front row to see the production. And the director of a film, of course, he is all the time present. He is going on doing it. This logic is applicable when we consider a so-called mentally disturbed condition. He laughs for some time, then he cries for some time, he talks a topic, in between he changes and so on and so forth. Or somebody goes to cook a cup of tea and then in between goes to do something else, turning out the stove. In which case that could be considered as an evidence for the role of continuity of the presence of the intent. But definitely intent is the creator. Intent is the creator of the doing. Intent is the originator. So you can look at it from the angle of the universe or the process in the world as we understand the world. The intent is far below, far deeper, far invisible, far intangible. So the intent is definitely present, but it is covered by the huge number of linkages of variants operating in different orbits in the manifestation of that intent. Got it? I can borrow the available knowledge about God. So everybody says it is indescribable, invisible, at the same time omnipresent, omniscient and omnipotent. Omnipresent meaning present in every particle, omniscient that knows everything, and omnipotent, capable of everything. They are all right, but they are all not that right in the sense of normal people's conceptualization of omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. It is somewhat very similar to the intent for a cup of tea. Is it there? Yes, is it there? Not visible. If someone comes in between to the kitchen and asks the person, what are you doing? She will say, yeah, I am making a cup of tea. Because the intent is for a cup of tea, but almost all the materials taken are just materials available in the current operating context. And the problem is none of those items in the involved in the making of a cup of tea looks like a cup of tea. The water does not look like a cup of tea. The tea powder does not look like a cup of tea. The vessel does not look like a cup of tea. The flame does not look like a cup of tea. The stove does not look like. Get the point. So, if we again transpose this metaphor into the world, the so-called God would never look like any of the visible things also. But the God is somehow there. Otherwise this manifested doing so the world would not happen. Like the intent for the cup of tea must be there. Otherwise the person would not be standing in the kitchen and wait for the boiling and wait for putting the tea powder, wait for putting the sugar and wait for the time of its making. Get the point? Arjun, are you getting everything right? Mantra Shiga got it right? Similarly, if the intent is for self-discovery, if the intent is for enlightenment, or intent is to reach the fully functioning individual level of the human entity, the activities are totally of the available levels only. There need not be a specialized activity in order to do self-discovery. Okay? Like the components in the making of a tea do not look like a cup of tea, the activities involved in a certain duration of doing may not look like anything connected to so-called enlightenment, so-called satori. Great number of population, I suppose, are misled by some of the suggested methodologies. I would say they were sort of forced, or they had to do that. Get the point? They had to suggest so-called meditation, so-called visiting, various so-called methodologies, and so on and so forth. Then only the general population can apparently believe that they are doing the cooking of the cup of tea of enlightenment. That is where the Japanese wonder of the tea ceremony. Sha no yu. Chanoyu, in between their hyphens. They, the Zen masters, or those who understood the essence of the core invariant of the process involved in self-discovery, they realized that every moment the self only is operating. So then they thought, why not we have something very visible or very, very easily sensible and doable with a kind of much more involvement. So they devised a symbol, what? Nothing but making a cup of plain tea. So Japanese tea ceremony or Shanayu is done with the intent of enlightenment, not to make a cup of tea. There the activity is the same, but the intent is different. Of course, in Zen monasteries there are other things like sitting in, so-called sitting in Padmasana kind of position called sitting meditation. And the word Zen itself is from the Japanese word Zazen, or I don't know exactly, but Zazen is the name for sitting meditation. That also is there. Because I would say it may require much more freedom of the intellect, absolute freedom and openness and simplicity and gentleness of mind to accept and to believe and to proceed to do a cup of tea, to identify the doer of the tea. So perhaps a significant majority must have followed the sitting meditation. Though tea ceremony was a regular practice, I think gradually it became just a ritual. It lost its capacity to trigger and satori. Satori is the Japanese word for enlightenment, though the Japanese concept of enlightenment is much more simple and much more realistic than the other
It's 22
concepts
hours.
of enlightenment. So whatever you do, even now you're sitting there is being monitored by your intended to attend this program. But you don't keep it in mind, you see. So, in order to get a result or in order to achieve a need or a want or a desire or an inspired outcome, the method is to get the intent. Because why? Why the intent has to be clarified. Even when a great lot of people try for so-called enlightenment, self-discovery, satori and so on and so forth, they are doing great lot of real hard work. Then how can you say they don't have proper intent? What is the problem there? What do you think the problem there is?
Intent is not clear.
Why? Intent could be even clear. Could I'm just to reduce the time. Intent is not originalized. Intent is somehow uh, captured their attention. Definitely they have some kind of an inclination because great majority of people are definitely not at all interested in self-discovery, enlightenment, satori and so on and so forth. That means only the possible, probable, susceptible people only would get even attracted to that. Okay? So there is something in the mind of a person who goes to see who is singing this Hindustani music. So there is a sensitivity, definitely. There is definitely a point of sensitivity that identified, yeah, this is something that captures my attention. Hindustani music or Carnatic music or the concept of enlightenment and self-discovery. So there is something in that person, definitely. But we are identifying, we are analyzing why when there is an intent for the tea, why the tea is not made, Vinay. When there is an intent for self-discovery, an intent for becoming a fully functioning, wonderful human being, why it is not happening? When there is an intent to do very well in an examination or to get a good degree, that means degree with good marks, why it is not get translated into the corresponding doing of the cooking of that tea? That's what we are discussing now.
It can also be because the ingredients used are not correct, right?
Yeah, that is the next one. One is the lack of originalization of intent. Secondly, there is no clarity, similarly, or clarity or a lack of knowing, lack of knowledge about the appropriate ingredients involved in the cooking of the cup of tea of reaching that fullness, that totality, that complete freedom of the mind. I want you to be clear about that. Don't get confused by the term enlightenment, satori, self-discovery, etc., etc., etc. These are all terms added by somebody else. But the clear element there is a kind of a feeling of fully free, absolutely free. If I talk about from my own experience, and as a researcher, if I express it, fully free in expressions, fully free in responses, fully free in behaving, wherever it is. But conditions apply, we will talk about it later. Fully free in relating with anybody, fully free in thought process and language. But at times, as we discussed the other times also, there could be other blocks, environmental blocks or uh, something else. Like we cannot be fully free in our expression to a rude policeman, or a rude boss, or a rude relative, or a rude friend. That's a different issue. Do not get confused about it. But you personally feel unlimited. That's one word I want to use. Oh, what I am experiencing? Just free. You can also use the word just feeling nobody. Because maintaining a somebodyness is a tension. You know, it's a job. It's a work. Just a nobody. That's again another word, another language we can use to represent the referent and the referent reality involved in fully functioning individual or a satori individual. Alright, that is in between a clarification I thought of. Then, okay, the variables involved, the doings involved, what is the exact, in case of a tea, water, tea powder, sugar, kettle, stove, etc. But Mandra Rishika, there is a situation when all these things are there, many people do not cook a good cup of tea. Good meaning, what an optimum quality of tea is possible with the given ingredients. Okay. What do you say about that?
Uh, I think even there is a problem with the intent.
Now, what is the problem with the intent there?
They might be having the intent to cook a cup of tea, but the intent to cook that particular cup of tea might not be completely aided by the creature. As in, they won't be doing it completely with a complete mind.
You are thinking in a little different line. They just do not know how to go about it.
What did you say, Sundarji?
They do not know how to use them. For example, let us say, because in the context of genius, I am forced to take the example of pranayama. That is exercising or managing the movement of the respiration process. Okay. That is perhaps the easiest, what you call, cooking of the cup of tea. But millions of people do not seem to be benefited out of that. Because somebody can say, okay, close this nostril for so much of time, then keep it there for so much of time, then release it by so much of time. But when this doing is done, where should be the attention? Where should be the consciousness? Because the consciousness is the you. not the pranayama doing body. The body is doing the respiration process, right? That it has been all the time doing. Now you are sort of, let us say, controlling it or manipulating it so that in the variation of that process, you may sometimes see what is doing the doing of that respiration. Get the point? Even there could be a kind of an ignorance about the kind of tea. We cook a cup of tea because tea is known to us. But for the intent of Satori, intent for enlightenment, none of them is sure about the outcome. That is the third point, Mantra Rishika and Parvati. They only have a word there. They do not have any clarity about what is the outcome. Get the point? If you look into the literature, as a researcher I have read some of those books written by the Indian so-called gurus and even Westerners and the people in philosophers, researchers in the US, researchers in England. Okay? They do not give detailed description about the state of being enlightened. They are sometimes I wonder they are also imitating some major guru. So you will feel blissful all the time. Okay, let us say so. And unfortunately that is sort of supported by the well-known names of the well-known gurus. You know. Or you will become totally different. And that also they think, because in most of the traditions, whether it is in the Catholic tradition or Islamic tradition or Buddhist tradition or the ancient Bharatiya tradition, almost all of them changed their names also, as an evidence of their renewed or rediscovered or evolved or clarified totality. So the audience intent becomes absolutely confused about the components involved, what to do with the components, and all these things are finally confused by the perhaps the wrong anticipation of the outcome, Vinay. So in the Indian Bharatiya concept, there they use the concept of Anandam. Directly translated in English literature, English language as blissfulness. So what is blissfulness? Nobody knows the concept, nobody is clear about the referent of blissfulness, nor the referent reality of being blissful, which is unfortunately confused by the expressions, responses, behaviors, ways of doing, ways of relating, and mostly the ways of languages of the so-called enlightened, well-known people. Get the point? But in case of Zen masters, they are the greatest exception. Of course, most of them, their dress, they were all wearing the same kimono. But I would say in that case also, they lived in their so-called buildings, translated into English as monasteries. Okay? They lived a certain kind of ascetic life, very simple life. Terribly simple life. So the audience might have thought that that is the kind of outcome. In my research, I did not find anyone giving a clear, genuine explanation why they are living like that, you know. But Zen talks about normal living, of course. You can work as a doctor or as a student or as a researcher or an HR head, completely in tune with the clarity of your freedom. I said completely in tune with the clarity of your freedom. That was the English word. I said about me. I tried to clarify saying that freedom of response. If you feel like crying, for example, let us say so, you cry. I have cried on the stage. I have cried in the classrooms. Even when I was teaching in my young age in Union Christian College, Alway, I cried in the classroom when a situation was there. I'm just explaining as an example. If you are happy, be happy. If you feel like talking to someone, talk. If you feel like dancing, dance. And that's all very huge example. This is what Osho used to say. In fact, Osho had some clear programs about that, The so-called dynamic dance in their auditorium called Zorba, the Utha. So he devised a dance form called a dynamic dance. That means you just move very, very eccentrically. Sort of lookingly, we can say kind of a mad movements. That means you have to just leave out your body and dance, and it would involve mostly turning round and round and round and round, closing your eyes. So doing that at certain point of time, your consciousness would get little bit detached and will observe the dancer. And after this drastic movement, when they are totally tired, they have to lie flat on the ground with the total attention on the body. And so on and so forth. That was one of the popular methodologies suggested by Osho. Then, as we discussed the last time, this intent could be borrowed, intent could be just like that duplicated. That also I have seen when I interacted with some 10, 12 so-called sannyasis who claim to have been enlightened. Okay, I felt they were very friendly, very well informed, etc., etc. But when I tested them, whenever I could test them, I found them all very arrogant, capable of terrible anger, animosity, hatred, and behaving like anybody else. In fact, the last one I got friendship with was a person who returned from Varanasi after some 25 years to his birthplace, Dindigul, and luckily he happened to come to stay with one of his relatives in Alandri. So who introduced me to him or introduced him to me, and he instantly liked me, and he used to come to our place where you have come before, Parvati, in that Dharmalingam's house. And almost every day he used to come there for breakfast and things like that. So one day I thought of testing him. And in my test, he became very angry, very arrogant, all the expressions, and finally, I don't know whether Mandra Rishika is aware of that, or she was a little girl. I asked him to get out of the house. And in front of that house there was in front of that house is a vacant area where a lot of children were playing cricket. They all looked at to that extent I had to shout at him. So, that means they are all basically so-called human beings. But he is definitely in tune with his entity, and he has been there very well known in Varanasi and Haridwar and other places, and he has been regularly giving lectures on enlightenment and related topic and Vedas and Puranas to an average 300 to 350 so-called Western audience, and spoke beautiful poetic English language also. So do not mistake that when you get angry or when you get emotional, you are not eligible for enlightenment or anything like that. And do not also think that an enlightened guy is some kind of a rock all the time in Anandamaya. The modern gurus can afford to be like that. They have nothing, no official work to do. They don't have to report to anybody. For example, Amardanandamai or Jaggi Vasudev or people like that. They are living a real life of freedom. They do more or less whatever they want. They own whatever they want. Every day, 100 people, 1,000 people visiting them. Anybody on earth would be completely happy, completely contented, completely pleased. That's why I talk about the concept of genius in self. Doing whatever job, a plate washer in a stupid restaurant or driver or clerk or doing a small enterprise or HR head or vice president or whoever, do that. That doing is the same as the doing of, let us say, Jaggi Vasudev. We look at the doing of Jaggi Vasudev as the doings of a so-called big guy, or the doings of Vivekananda, or the ways of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, or Ranganathananda Swami, or the doings of Buddha. These are the people who apparently did something so-called different. What was the doing of Krishna according to records? What was the doing of Jesus? There are a lot of myths created that making 5 pieces of bread into 5,000 or water into wine and walking on the surface of the water, etc. So I clarified this much so that reflect upon that and be clear that just to maintain that intent to become a fully functioning individual, to do wonders in whatever you have to do. Coincidentally, things happening so that your doings become wonderful. An effortless doing of wonder. Second point, which now I remember, it is first of all freedom of the mind, and secondly effortlessness in doing whatever is being done. Because that is by the natural process. We don't see an effortfulness in the growth of the trees, in the flight of the birds, in the selection of the twigs by the birds to construct its nest, even in the search for food by an abandoned cat. You don't see the kind of effortfulness and tension and worry and frustration and disappointment and such great things on the part of them, which are very commonly manifested by almost everybody. So, freedom of the mind, and secondly that effortlessness in your doing. That's all. Therefore I chose to discuss the Zen parable of the woodcutter. Have you heard that parable, Parvati? Arjun?
From you.
Mantra, Rishika, yes. But the parables are like a kaleidoscope. That was the purpose of creation of parables. It can be used, it can be looked at from different vantage points. And everything can be looked at from different vantage points. That is definitely there. That I just remind you. Everything can be looked at from different vantage points. In which case, parables are paramount possibilities to look at it from different advantageous vantage points. So today I will once again present the magnificent parable of the woodcutter from the angle of the intent. So to give a little background of the woodcutter, he lived definitely in a remote village, closer to the forest. But it was a village with a lot of people, to whom he sold the wood or the log being cut from the forest, and from that income he used to live alone. Now I remember the third aspect of the uh, satoried person. That I would call some kind of an invincibility. Somehow or the other he or she feels very secretly so great about self, on top of the world. That's an other person based perception though. Like even if Krishna or Buddha or Jesus appear before you, you would look at them the way you look at your friend. You will not be overwhelmed by anything in this world. That is the third attribute. That kind of a clarity is there. If you are a nobody, why you should be afraid of the so-called Krishna or Shiva or anybody? Why should you be afraid of God itself? If there is a God, the way the religions constantly try to establish, which is definitely not there though. Anyway, so this woodcutter lived by all his freedom. Whenever he felt the need of money, or when the already existent money is over, then only he would think of going to the forest and cut a tree. His motives, his needs, his wants, his hopes, his aspirations, his desires were not at all borrowed or imitated or duplicated from the environment. That is the next point. That is inevitably linked with the freedom of the mind. So, woodcutter was like that. So one day when he felt the need of going to the forest to cut a tree, he proceeded his journey early morning. Again the point of difference of a highly tuned individual. He would not just go enter the forest and cut any tree. Because when you are really free, whatever is the referent of that freedom of the mind meaning not to be constrained, not to be controlled, not to be contaminated by any of the existing campaigns of the world about things and entities and people and phenomena. I mean to say that even trees and plants were living or fully functioning living beings for him. There was no difference between his ways of his state of mind when he looked at a tree and when he looked at someone who comes to buy his wood. Therefore, it was imperative that he must get the permission from a tree in order to cut it. By the time he identified a tree that day, it was little late. And that was a reasonably heavy tree also, with a heavy, rather heavy, strong trunk. And again,
It's
he would not just
22:30.
cut the branches, he would just cut a tree completely. And take the branches separately at various points of time. So he started his cutting. He finished almost half of it, which only he could do because he was definitely competent. Like a samurai in his sword, he was equally a swordsman with his axe. Then a strange animal appeared behind him, which he saw. In fact, he stopped his cutting and looked with surprise and wonder. Though he was fully free, he felt a wonder. Because his mind was qualified by absolute freedom, there was no fear or anxiety or inordinate surprise or wonder. Oh, such an animal is there, that's all, finished. Alright, there was no time to look at the animal and study them. And he had all the reason to wonder because he has been going to the forest for a long time and he had never seen such a thing before at all. But even then he was cool about it. That's also one of the attributes of a free mind. Unlike great majority of people who get stupefied by the presence of so-called big people and feel some arrogant highness when they see people from the lowest range of existence, like a beggar on the road or a poor woman on the road, or somebody below in status and whatever. See, look at the media. All those media exist by this kind of majority normal distribution mindsets only. There are so many videos now going on, even by the lead channels, about the wedding of the daughter of Suresh Gopi, MP, in Kerala state. He's a very well-known film actor, plus an active member of the Bharatiya Janata Party and going to be very likely the candidate for the MP position in the coming election. And well known as a very well behaving, good character person also. That's okay. But such a prominence happened for the wedding of the daughter because the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi himself, participated in that wedding. According to his promise to him maybe months back or weeks back. So it is, I am not telling it is anything negative or wrong. Even now the news is running. Many shots of Prime Minister coming and blessing them and all that. Alright, wonderful. No Prime Minister can do that. He is definitely an extraordinary individual, no doubt. He is Narendra Damodar Das Modi is a real genius himself, a fully functioning individual. I am sure he will abdicate this position of Prime Ministership and will go in search of enlightenment. No doubt about that. And I know why he got such a blessing, such a greatness, because in his childhood he has served a terminally ill sannyasi. As a young boy, a 10 or 12-year-old boy, he was taking care of a highly ill sannyasi abandoned by everybody, whose entire body was afflicted afflicted with some very serious contagious kind of an illness. And I am sure he got the blessings of that Guru. That he must have been an extraordinary person, no doubt. Extraordinary individuals are never well known, never be even known. So that was the most remarkable turning point, I would say, in the destiny of Narendra Damodar Das Modi, no doubt about that. Anyway, and many other things. Now coming back to the point, people are bewildered, people are so fascinated to see such a big presence of the Prime Minister of the largest democracy in the world. And again there are equally running news, that is all the so-called film stars, big heroes also were present. An equal number of videos are about them also, you see. Mammooty, Mohanlal, Bijuman, that also is there. And it will get a lot of audience, no doubt. In order to clarify the concept of freedom, I repeat, in order to clarify the concept of freedom, a real free mind will be unaffected by the turbulence, whether it is positive turbulence or negative turbulence. For example, if I was there in the very nearby road of where Prime Minister was travelling, I would be sitting in my room doing more or less the same thing. Because he is very familiar. We can see his photograph in terrible close-up in so many times. We have heard his speeches. And why should you particularly go? But with again clarifying the freedom of mind. But let us say you are sitting there idle and there is not much crowd in front of your house. You normally go out for a cup of tea. You go out into the road. Same way you will go out into the road when the Prime Minister comes. Respecting the protocol, you will also adopt a stand. That's all. I am clarifying what I call the freedom of mind, unaffected by the ups and downs, unaffected by the orbits and variations of the variance in existence. Using the example that woodcutter was not at all stupefied at the presence of the strangest animal in the forest. And within no time, that animal started hitting at him, pricking him, or hitting at his legs and all that from behind, as if to prevent him from cutting the tree. Not as if, it was almost really as if. So immediately he stopped and turned back at the animal and looked at it. Then the animal just moved away. Again he started cutting, keeping the same mind. That's also a free mind, you know. There was no agitation, there was no irritation. Cool. Just turned back and looked at it. And when it moved away, then he started the cutting. Again the animal started attacking him with a little more force. He continued cutting, but still at a point where that organic being gets a little bit affected, little bit perhaps injured also, then he again turned back. Animal moved away, as with a cat in conflict. Then he thought, okay, let me finish this animal, and he very quickly swept or dashed his axe to cut its head. It was an easy act for him, because he was not only a woodcutter, that's why he was almost like a samurai with the sword. He was very competent in using the axe to kill a dangerous attacking animal also. But to his surprise, the animal just slipped away. which of course induced a moment of surprise or wonder in him. Then he completely turned back and took a stance and tried to kill the animal. So he tried all his possible strategies or methods or attention, whatsoever he could command. Using all those, he tried to kill the animal, but the axe just could not touch the animal, nor the animal left the place. It just slipped away. And he got really tired. Then he thought, anyway, it is not biting him or really injuring him, and according to his principle, he had to finish the cutting of the tree. He never have done that before. Because you start cutting a tree, you have to finish it. It is like a samurai cutting the head in single stroke. But that is not possible with a tree. But in a single instance, the tree had to be cut. So he thought of continuing the activity of cutting. So he continued. Now he restarted. Again, this animal started attacking with much more force. Finally, he got little more power of that intent to kill the animal. Now, situation is different. Now he abandoned his concept of whatever, not to kill any animal or anything like that. Anyway, he gathered all his decision to really kill the animal, and he turned back and tried. But only he got really tired, and the animal was still as agile as ever before, and the axe could not touch it. Nor the animal moved far away. It was like an efficient, what you call, gymnast, or efficient samurai or a fighter. Finally, he thought, okay, let him do what it does, and I am going to do what I am doing. I have come here for this doing. If the animal kills me, let me die here. But I cannot afford to stop my doing, because this doing was my existence, and I wouldn't mind dying doing this doing. So getting ready to die, even if that happens, by perhaps flowing blood from his body or by his tiredness. When he dash a hand to hit someone, and if it does not hit anywhere, you get more tired, because there is no resistance. Because the intent was to hit, but if the hand does not hit anywhere, you will feel more weak. Okay? So he was very weak. So deciding to even die, he restarted his cutting, and he went on cutting. And the animal also went on attacking him with much more force possibly. After a while, the head of the axe, the blade of the axe, slipped out of its handle, wooden handle, and exactly hit the neck of the animal, and the animal died instantly. That's the parable. That's the level of intent. That's ultimate intent. Somewhat like that depicted in the film Titanic. Somewhat like Bruce Lee asked the photographer, "Do you think my hand did the cutting of the bricks?" Because the hand cannot cut the bricks, no doubt. It is the intent to get the bricks cut with that action. When the good cook and the bad cook are cooking, but when the good cook cooks, the quality of the output is great. So look at the variables, look at the various orbits of the existence of that woodcutter. Look at the mind setting of that woodcutter. We are all woodcutters, actually speaking, in our existence. We are cutting, instead of cutting woods per se, we go to organizations and do our job. We try for our so-called intents of high goals of life to become someone, to achieve a role position and things like that. But we have to continue the cutting of or the doing of certain doing so that our attention, the axe of our attention will get a slip and capture the totality of that self. Keep that intent. And we are doing minimum different kinds of cutting of trees every day. And do that cutting properly. Then all the entities and things and phenomena and people who would come to disturb you will get automatically what you call terminated from the scene. That's why I said the last that when you are a fully functioning individual, you will become invincible. That most powerful animal who could manage the conscious utterance of the most competent woodcutter, it got killed by the movement driven. If I use the word, there is the concept of driven, what Arjun said, driven by that intent, because nevertheless he was affected by the attack of that animal. By the way, this particular parable, like all other parables, were great devices of analytical reflection created by the Supreme Zen Masters in order to facilitate the earnest disciples to reach their intent of discovering whatever they wanted to discover. Therefore, this particular parable itself is named Satori, and that animal is named Satori. In the parable, in the very parable itself, the animal's name is Satori. So, be a woodcutter every day morning. Alright, Arjun, Mantra Rishika and Parvati. So, that's all. Any questions? Or any point of discussion? I will keep this particular video only for 4 people, okay? When I upload this, it will be restricted only to 4 people. Vinay, Arjun, Mantra, Rishika and Parvati. because I upload this, they don't want to come. And I see that the uploaded videos are seen by many people. So, they should have the sincerity to be here. Unless there is other significant reasons. Unless they inform me in advance. Alright. Wish you
How do you
all.
know which intent is working in which situation?
Which one? In this situation?
This situation, yeah, when you said that is coming to my mind.
Okay, yeah, by allowing only you people to see, eh? Yeah,
No,
that,
no.
yeah.
Participation or any ingredients, any components in the process. How do we know whose intent is working there? It need not be my intent only when I am making a tea. It can be an external intent also.
Yeah, when you talk about the tea, there can be the intent of your visitor also. Because you make the tea because the visitor asked you. But you should also carry that intent, otherwise you cannot do the cooking of the tea. I thought you asked my intent, why I am restricting it to only 4 of you.
Now, that thought occurred when you said it will be only restricted to 4 people.
Yeah.
So
Because,
I was thinking whose intent would be working that the number is reducing.
oh, that we cannot be sure at all. That we cannot be sure. Whose intent is working in what other context. We have to be clear about our intent, and we can try to be clear about the intent of somebody who is directly interacting with us, or about somebody whose actions are known to us in its details. Now we do not know what happened to the others. So I was assuming one reason that at least two, three people told me that they find it easier to listen to the videos than sitting here in late night Saturdays. Because it could be a fact. But at the same time, I have always a comparative scale. I do not say analysis and conclusions simply like that. I have an evidence. The previous program, what was its name? I even forgot that.
GCF.
Yeah, Genius Choice Fellow program. It ran for more than close to 100 plus sessions, and every session was 3 hours. And most of them violated the 3 hours and went even to 3.5 hours, or at least 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 minutes. And in every one of them, see, close to 108 plus sessions. Every one of them was present throughout that time, every Saturday. Very interesting. And most of them were equally qualified or holding responsible positions in organizations or institutions. So that's a beautiful question. This I also thought about it. So genius itself is not the same as Genius Choice Fellow program. That was oriented towards mostly knowings, so that like a degree you take, some ideas are there, and in a given context, if a dialogue happens, you will know what to talk back. That was kind of a postgraduate diploma program kind of a thing. But this, as I told from the very beginning, a very genuine, it started with a genuine intent to help you to reach that genius in yourself. Not a doubt about that. So in which case, I may have to say they do not have the destiny to reach that level. That's all, very simple. I don't mind saying that. Or there are other silly explanations like they are taking this for granted, which may not be true because they are all very highly committed people. I know every one of them, so that may not be the fact. Then the question, why? What happened to the previous session? There were more members, if you remember, some 14 or so. Here only about 8 or 6 or 7.